Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Tech Talk with René. And this time I have Kris Rice, Vice President of Development at Oracle, with me. And this week there was a very big announcement on Oracle database service on Azure, and Kris is here to talk a little bit about this with us. So welcome, Kris, and how are you?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Renee. It's been too long since we spoke and saw each other in many open worlds ago.
I know. It's been a while, but things are changing, and hopefully we'll get to see each other this time in Las Vegas, not San Francisco this
Yeah.
time. Yeah, but yeah. So Kris, give us a prior to start talking about this new offering or this new announcement that was made. Can you give us a little introduction on who
Sure.
you are and
Yeah,
what you do
sure.
at Oracle?
Absolutely. Obviously I'm Kris I'm in the database organization. And what we did I run tools like SQL Developer, SQL Developer Web. I do for anyone using Oracle Cloud, I do all the database consoles, whether that's an XSCS you're creating, an autonomous data loading, all of those things. And then specifically for here, what we're talking about is this new Oracle database services for Azure, which is a pretty fun project we've been working on for a while.
And it does seem so. So getting right into it, can you talk a little bit about then the announcement that was made around Oracle database service on Azure? Are you calling it ODAS? How are you calling it?
It's had so many names, like everything, right? So Oracle Database Services for Microsoft Azure is the fully spelled out one, ODSA. So Oracle Database Service for Azure is the short what we could do.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for me, one of the biggest things about this project is the folks that announced it. I mean, when have we ever seen Larry and Satya together on a video? That's phenomenal.
I know, like that was a big impact. Like early in the morning Wednesday when I saw it, yeah, that was huge.
Yeah, I've truly been trying to remember. I don't know that the two CEOs, whoever Microsoft has ever co-announced something with Larry.
I can't remember something like that as well.
So that speaks hugely to this partnership we have going.
Yeah, I can imagine. But what is this announcement that was made, right?
Yeah, so
that
behind the guys that announced it,
yeah,
here's what we did. So
because like you're the obviously like there's a lot of smart people around the room, but you included, right? And part of you led this team and
yeah, so it was a big team, a big joint effort between my team in database and the OCI team, the cloud team. What we did at the basics is the interconnect came out in 2019, I believe it is. It has hundreds of customers using it. They love the interconnect. So what we did is we took a half a step back and thought about what would a multi-cloud experience really be, because honestly getting the network plumbing and having SQLnet or connectivity, that's like minimum effort. That's the minimum bar. Obviously if that's slow, everything else sucks later on, but that's the minimum. So then if you take a step above that, what does that mean? Well, Azure has a specific vernacular, OCI has a different vernacular. So number one, you have to whip out your thesaurus and learn both sides. So we actually made that vernacular common in a dedicated portal for the Azure customer. So when they land here, it's very familiar. The vernacular is familiar. They don't have to break out and say, what's a VNet versus a VCN? What's a resource group versus a compartment? We did that stuff for them. And then higher than that, we even took a step further and said, well, if a customer has a primary workload on, say, Azure, so for argument's sake, we'll say they have a Java mid-tier running connecting to an Oracle database. Well, in previous multi-cloud kind of DIY, you would have to monitor that Java compute node in the Azure portal with their metrics. You'd have to monitor the Oracle database in our portal with our metrics. So we actually started plumbing those metrics directly over to Azure as well. So that lets you have a single pane of glass over on the Azure side for monitoring the entire app stack. And now the downfall of that is, rewind not very far ago, we had customers that would log a ticket and you did vendors complaining about each other for a customer problem, right? It's like, oh, it's not our problem, it's that vendor or that vendor. So coupled in with this is a collaborative support arrangement also with Microsoft. So even though this is multi-cloud, you got one place to log a ticket, engages both support channels, and we can get things done quickly.
Oh, that's quite cool. So you don't have to go into Moss, and then you don't have to go to the Azure support. So everything is done through that portal, right?
It's right in this one portal. Under the covers, of course, we integrated with Moss. We talked to Microsoft, right? But we brought it together into this one portal so that, it's all about what we can do for the customer, make customers' life easy.
Okay. Now, I'm assuming, and I haven't done it, but that's kind of like one of my tasks for this weekend is going through the setup and start utilizing the service, right? But I did read through it that it's quite simple. If you have an OCI account or if you don't have an OCI account, you can do it, right?
Yes. So if you land and you already have an OCI tenancy, there's what's called a linking step. You'll be able to link that tenancy to your Azure tenancy. If you do not have a tenancy in Oracle yet, there's a streamlined workflow. I think it's like 5 to 7 minute range. It will establish you an OCI tenancy and link it automatically as well.
Okay. Yeah. No. So, well, in my case, I've been Oracle for 20 years, so it's more on the linking side of it and creating side of it, right? I did see a couple of videos on how this is done, and it does look pretty streamlined, right? But it does bring up a couple of questions, right? And especially, I think, security-wise, right? Because when you were setting the interconnects, as you mentioned, right? Like I had to go through like setting up all of my my VCN, my security list, all of that. Is that done streamlined now, or how does that work?
Yep, we streamlined the whole thing. So basically, you go through the one flow, and there's a screen, of course, called networking, and there's effectively 2 interesting things on there. The first interesting thing is a drop-down list for your subscription for your resource group of the VNets available in Azure. The other thing interesting is the network on the OCI side. We take those 2 extreme ends of the networking and we do all the interconnect plumbing to make sure that those 2 networks can speak to each other. That's the only input from the user.
Okay. Now, do I have the opportunity to keep on playing with that, or is that once it's set up, then?
Well, I mean, you can make new databases. You can, of course, go under the covers and rip out VCNs, rip out VNets, and break the thing if you want. But as far as tweaking it, there's not too much more you can tweak there, because, like we said, we're taking care of the 2 endpoints on the 2 networks, and everything in between we're setting up automatically.
Okay.
And probably the most important thing about that setup right there is that's going over a fast connect interconnect that Oracle pays for, so there's no net cost to the customer.
And that's a very good segue, like cost-wise. And you mentioned there is no cost. So the same, or let me rephrase this. The same egress cost and ingress cost that we had prior to the service being announced are those rules still apply.
Well, if you mean when you say the same ingress egress that exists, meaning 0, because it's interconnect, so it's unmeasured, yes, that still applies 0. Okay. 0 is a nice easy number to remember.
Yeah.
So you just all you have to pay for is the core database service, and of course on the Azure side you pay for your Azure services.
Okay. No, that's good to know, right? Especially because makes it a little bit simpler.
Yes.
For the end users.
Right. Other words, we all know. Yeah. Other words, we all know these ingress egresses eat your bills fast, right?
Yeah. Now, I'm assuming that, let's say that I want to start playing with this. Does the always free autonomous
Not yet.
can I still use that?
So not yet. So we
Okay.
focused on the costed things first for this initial GA.
Okay.
Coming in the future we'll get the free stuff there. Also coming in the future is we'll get it to where you can onboard, maybe it's not a great word, but ramp in an existing database. Right now it's net new creations only.
Okay. Okay. So I think that's very important to know, right? Because there are some people that are already using the interconnect, right? And
Right.
would love to start seeing some of the features like that you mentioned, right? Like
Absolutely.
the management part. There's some metrics, right? You also mentioned that there is a portal side,
Yep.
and you're sending metrics from the database to Azure.
Yep.
Those are still not visible yet, or?
Well, just to finesse that, so we don't actually send metrics from the database to Azure. What we did is we made it more generic. So
Okay.
we tagged a resource in OCI, meaning the database. We tagged that such that the OCI metric store knows that this resource's metrics should flow directly to the Azure metrics. What that means is the database doesn't have to learn Azure at all. It's completely abstracted. So if the database starts producing, metrics 15 through 20 into the OCI metrics, they'll automatically show up on the Azure side as well.
Okay. Okay. That's actually quite cool, right? Because it allows you to,
nice.
Yeah, it allows you to grow, right? Now, right now, correct me if I'm wrong on this. Right now, there's three offerings that are happening, right? It's autonomous, database service, and Exa cloud.
Correct. Yep.
Right. Now, when we're talking about Exa, is it on? Remind me the name. Is it on
the X9M, the new fancy machine?
Yeah. Would the clients be getting that and
yep.
on dedicated infrastructure or on shared infrastructure?
So concretely then, since you went there, autonomous shared is in the portable. Autonomous dedicated is not yet.
Okay.
ExaCS, Exadata, I forget the official name we call it, but ExaCS we all call it. That is there. And that's where it's just like in OCI, you get the drop down list. Do you want X8, XM, X9? I think they have a concept of a base Exadata, which might be, going back to the sixes or something like that. Or like you mentioned, the VM, the base database service.
Okay. Now, I'm assuming like when we're talking about the cloud service, right? Not autonomous. When are we going to get patching and all of that? Because when we're talking autonomous is like basically, Oracle manages everything for us, right? So we don't have to worry about it, right? And but when we're talking about the database cloud service, well, the client still has to manage some of that part, right?
Correct. Identical to how OCI works today, right?
Okay.
You'll be notified. I believe they follow, roughly the RSU, the quarterly patching cycles. The patches show up. You have to click the buttons. The automation is there to help do the patching. It's not like you have to roll up your sleeves and fire up OPatch or something like that, but it's identical to OCI.
Okay, no, that's quite cool. And then when you talk about automation, then that comes, or for me, it brings up another question, right?
Sure.
Talking about infrastructure as code, Terraform in particular, right? How are we? Is there something right now for this to be managed as infrastructure as a code, or is that something that it's being thought out in the future?
It's being thought out in the future. So here's nuts and bolts. What we did, right, is we built our portal. Under the portal is a thing called the multi-cloud control plane. That control plane is the isolation layer. So the actual, in everything we're talking about, the actual core database in OCI basically didn't change. We didn't have to change those services. This veneer, if you will, of this multi-cloud control plane handles the acknowledgement and the interactions with the remote cloud. So for this GA, we focused on making sure the portal worked, make sure the APIs work. Coming soon will be, we'll wrapper it up so you can do normal infrastructure as code stuff.
Okay, that's quite cool. And just for everybody to know, like one of the things that like Kris and his team is very focused as well on ORDS, right? So he knows when he's talking about APIs, and his team is super experienced from that, and so a lot of confidence that is going to work as flawless as possible, right? So from that perspective, we're very confident from that part, right?
Absolutely.
Now, maybe you can share this, maybe you cannot, right? What is it that you see as a second step, right? After this offering, or what was announced, or what is it that you and your team are developing that can be shared out, right? Obviously, there's a ton of things that cannot.
So I'll give you the vague answers I was supposed to give all the press people. So you can look at the other popular database offerings Oracle has. There's one that starts with an H. That is probably coming soon. So we're working on onboarding other database services. And the other is, since I told you like that, we've got this abstraction layer called the multiple cloud control plane. We could absolutely repeat this with other cloud vendors.
Oh, wow. That's super interesting.
Yes.
No, and I mean, I'm excited for this. Obviously, a ton of questions. As I said, I still need to try this out. I know that there are some clients that can benefit from this. Some that will have a lot of questions around this, and especially that they're already doing both Oracle on Azure or Oracle interconnecting with Azure, right? So it's I know that a lot of questions are around that, but I do appreciate you, Kris, for taking time to talk with me. And again, I'm going to be sharing out a couple of links where people can go to and reference this new offering or this new service. Well, it's service, right? So it's a new service, and you'll be able to find it in the video. Right?
Absolutely. This is step one of multi-cloud. There's a lot coming.
Thank you very much, Kris.